Look, some people fall into relationships by accident. But I actively hunted mine down like it was Black Friday and Dylan was the last TV on sale. I'm Brianna. I'm 26. And back then, I was working retail at one of those department stores where you pretend to fold clothes while secretly judging customers' outfit choices. Dylan was this guy I met at a baseball game. You know how some guys get all protective and explanatory when they think you don't understand sports? He was doing that whole let me show you how this works thing while buying me overpriced stadium nachos. And honestly, I was eating it up even though I probably knew more about batting averages than he did. But whatever. He was trying. And after months of dating guys who thought Netflix and chill was the height of romance, Dylan felt like winning the damn lottery. He worked somewhere in logistics, moving boxes around or coordinating shipments. Something boring but stable. The kind of job that meant he'd always have money for dinner, but would never be rich enough to get cocky about it. Those first few months were honestly pretty great. And I'm not just saying that to make what happened later sound worse. He'd actually cook real meals, not just throw a frozen pizza in the oven and call it date night. He'd text me good morning without me having to train him like a puppy. Actually listened when I complained about work drama, and didn't immediately try to get in my pants on the first date. I remember thinking, finally, a guy who gets it. But here's the thing about guys who seem too good to be true. And I'm speaking from experience here. They usually are hiding something big. It started small, little things that made my radar go off. Like when I'd asked to see his phone to check the time or whatever, he'd hand it over way too easily. Normal guys at least hesitate or make some joke about their browser history. Dylan would just slide it right over with this innocent smile that felt almost rehearsed. So I started testing him, just basic girlfriend stuff that any reasonable person would do. Hey, can I see your phone? I want to check something. And every single time, he'd just hand it over like he had absolutely nothing to hide, which honestly made me more suspicious. What kind of guy has 0 questionable texts? No weird photos, no dating apps hidden in folders. I'd scroll through everything, his messages, his photos, his search history, looking for something, anything that would prove he wasn't as perfect as he seemed. But there was literally nothing, just work stuff about shipment schedules, boring conversations with his friends about sports scores, and messages with his dad about golf. It was almost disappointing, like finding out your Christmas presents are all practical socks instead of something exciting. Part of me started wondering if he was just really good at covering his tracks, or if he kept a secret phone somewhere, or if he was one of those guys who deletes everything as soon as he sends it. Then there was this one evening when he was supposed to pick me up at 7. And 7:15 rolls around, and I'm still standing there, watching cars go by. When he finally showed up at 7:20 with this story about being stuck behind some farm equipment, I'm thinking, really, that's what you're going with? I mean, come on, a tractor in our area. But he sticks to his story, even laughs about it, like getting delayed by agricultural machinery is genuinely hilarious. Stacy, he said. And I hated when he called me that because it wasn't even close to my name. I was literally crawling behind this ancient John Deere, going maybe 15 miles per hour. The guy was probably older than my grandfather, and just as slow. He seemed genuinely amused by the whole situation. But I'm standing there, thinking either he's the world's best liar, or he's telling the truth, and I don't know which possibility bothers me more. Because here's what I was really thinking. Punctual guys don't just suddenly start being late unless something changes. And when something changes in a relationship, it's usually because there's someone else in the picture. But Dylan just kept acting like nothing was different. Like 20 minutes late was no big deal. Like I should just laugh it off and move on. Which honestly made me even more suspicious, because wouldn't someone who actually cared be more apologetic about keeping me waiting? Key point 2, red flags I should have seen. Things really got weird when we'd go out to restaurants. There was this one time at some casual place, nothing fancy, just burgers and fries, and our waitress was being way too friendly, like unnecessarily friendly. She's all bright smiles, and you two are absolutely adorable together, while she's refilling our drinks for the third time without us asking. Most waitresses bring your food and move on to the next table, but this one kept finding excuses to come back and chat. Dylan just said thanks and kept eating his burger like nothing unusual was happening. But I'm watching this whole performance thinking, is this girl serious right now? She's leaning over our table more than necessary, laughing at Dylan's boring comments about the weather, and making way too much eye contact while she's talking. Classic flirting behavior that apparently flew right over his head. So afterwards, I'm like, did you notice how she was acting with you? And he gives me this genuinely confused look, like he truly didn't pick up on any of the signals I'd been watching for the past hour. She was just being nice. Babe, that's literally her job. Nice, right? That's what guys always say when women are throwing themselves at them and they either don't notice or pretend not to notice. But fine, maybe I was reading too much into a waitress doing her job well. Except then it happened again at the coffee shop. And again at the grocery store when the checkout girl commented on his shirt. And again when we were walking downtown and some random woman asked him for directions. It was like Dylan had this invisible magnet that attracted female attention, but he genuinely seemed oblivious to all of it. Which made me wonder, was he really that clueless? Or was he just really good at playing innocent? Because in my experience, guys who act like they don't notice when women are interested usually notice more than anyone else. They just pretend to be surprised when you bring it up so they can make you feel crazy and possessive. Then came the night he went out with his college buddies. I wasn't invited, which already had me feeling some type of way about the whole situation. It's just a guys' night, he said, like that was supposed to make me feel better about being excluded from part of his social life. We're probably just going to drink too much beer and argue about fantasy football. I tried to play the cool girlfriend role. Have fun with the boys, I said. Even though inside, I'm thinking this is probably when he's going to show his true colors. Guys' nights are when all the stuff happens that they don't want their girlfriends to know about. That's when they go to strip clubs, or hit on bartenders, or do whatever they think they can get away with because their girlfriends aren't around to witness it. He texted me throughout the night, which was good, but also felt like he was trying a little too hard to prove he wasn't doing anything wrong. Around 10:30, he sends this group selfie with all his college friends crowded around some bar table, everyone making stupid faces and holding up their beers like they're celebrating something. I'm zooming in on every corner of that photo like I'm investigating a crime scene, looking for anything suspicious in the background. And there she is, some random girl photobombing behind them. She's not even really in the picture, just her face peeking over someone's shoulder. But something about her presence in his photo annoyed the hell out of me. Who was she? Why was she close enough to get in their picture? How did she end up in the background of Dylan's night out? So I called him immediately, even though I could hear loud music and voices in the background when he picked up, "Who's that girl in your photo?" He sounds confused. Probably a little drunk. What girl? Which photo? The one you just sent me. There's some girl in the background. Who is she? There's a pause while he probably shows the picture to his friends. Then he comes back with, "Oh, that's probably someone's coworker or girlfriend. I honestly don't know her name." But see, that's exactly what someone would say if they were trying to cover something up. You don't know her name, but she's close enough to photobomb your group picture. Brianna. It's crowded here. People are everywhere. She probably just happened to be walking by when we took the photo. We argued about it for 20 minutes while his friends were probably listening to every word. And I could tell he was getting frustrated with my questions. But I needed answers. Who was she? Why was she at the same bar? How did he really not know anything about her? And why did he sound so defensive when I was just asking reasonable questions about a stranger appearing in his photos? Looking back now, maybe I should have trusted him, but trust doesn't come easy when you've been burned by guys before. And Dylan was just too perfect, too understanding, too willing to put up with my concerns without ever getting really angry about them. Key point 3, the golf trip. When Dylan's dad invited him on some weekend golf trip, every alarm in my head started going off at once. 2 whole days of not knowing where he was or who he was with. 48 hours of him being around other people where literally anything could happen and I'd never know about it. I tried to act casual about it at first, but inside I was already freaking out about all the possibilities. "So who exactly is going on this trip?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light and curious instead of suspicious and demanding. He starts listing off his dad and a bunch of his dad's friends from work or golf or wherever middle-aged guys meet each other. "Just a bunch of old dudes," he said, like that was supposed to be reassuring. Dad's been planning this for months. 2 days of terrible golf and complaining about everything. "All guys," I pressed, because you never know when someone might bring their daughter or when they might meet up with other people once they get there. "Yeah, babe, all guys." Just me, Dad, and his buddies who spend most of their time talking about their lower back pain and how golf was better back in their day. He was trying to make it sound boring and harmless. But here's what I was really thinking. Guys' trips are where things happen. That's when they go to strip clubs that they'd never go to with their girlfriends around. That's when they meet women at hotel bars or golf course clubhouses. That's when they do all the stuff they can't do, when they have to answer to someone at home. And 2 days is a long time for someone to keep their story straight if they're doing things they shouldn't be doing. Or I made him promise to text me constantly, not just once or twice a day, but regularly enough that I'd know he was thinking about me and not getting distracted by whatever opportunities came up. "Send me pictures," I said. "I want to see what you're doing." He agreed, probably just to stop me from spiraling completely into paranoia mode. But I could tell he thought I was being unreasonable about a simple golf weekend. The first day, his texts were everything I wanted to see. Pictures of him and his dad on the golf course, both of them looking sweaty and frustrated with their terrible swings. Updates about how badly they were playing. Complaints about the heat, even a photo of their lunch at the clubhouse that looked exactly like the kind of boring food middle-aged guys would order. "Miss you." He texted with a selfie of him and his dad making goofy faces. Dad says hi, but something shifted on the second day. His responses started getting shorter, less detailed. When I text asking what he was doing, instead of the long descriptions from the day before, he'd just say golf or hanging out or dinner with Dad. It felt like he was pulling away, like maybe something had happened or someone had caught his attention, and now he was trying to minimize our contact so he could focus on whatever new situation he'd found himself in. I started imagining all these scenarios in my head. What if there were women working at the golf course who were flirting with the younger guy in the group? What if they went to dinner somewhere and he met a bartender or server who gave him her numbers? What if his dad's friends had daughters who happened to be in town and joined them for drinks? What if the hotel had some kind of social event where he could meet other people? By Sunday night, when he was supposed to be driving home, I had worked myself into a complete state of anxiety and suspicion. Every scenario I'd imagined felt more real than his boring explanations. And I was convinced something had happened that he wasn't telling me about. When he finally got back to his apartment, I was ready to interrogate him about every detail of the trip. But when I saw him, he seemed genuinely happy to be home. He brought me flowers, not expensive ones, just grocery store daisies, but still. He took me to dinner at our usual place and spent the whole meal telling me stories about his dad's friends and their golf disasters. How one guy lost 6 balls in the water hazard. How another guy spent 10 minutes looking for his ball in the woods, only to realize he'd been looking in the wrong fairway entirely. He seemed completely normal, relaxed, even like nothing unusual had happened, and he was just glad to be back with me after a weekend of listening to old men complain about their golf games, which honestly made me even more suspicious. Because wouldn't someone who'd done something wrong be acting guilty or nervous or different in some way? The fact that he was acting so perfectly normal felt like proof that he was hiding something big. If the trip had really been as boring as he claimed, wouldn't there be some evidence of that boredom? Some complaint about how long the weekend felt, or how annoying his dad's friends were, or how much he'd missed our routine. Instead, he just kept being the same sweet, attentive Dylan. telling me he loved me and acting like everything was exactly the same as before he left. I kept waiting for him to slip up, to mention some detail that would contradict his story or reveal what he'd really been doing. But he never did. He just kept talking about golf scores and bad jokes and how his dad had embarrassed himself at the hotel restaurant by complaining about the service. All perfectly innocent details that could easily be covering up the real story of what happened when I wasn't around to see it. Key point 4, the breaking point. 2 days after Dylan got back from his golf trip, I decided I was done, waiting for him to confess whatever he was hiding. I'd been going crazy trying to figure out what really happened. And since he clearly wasn't going to volunteer the truth, I was going to have to find it myself. When I got home from work early that Tuesday, his iPad was sitting right there on the coffee table like it was waiting for me. I figured this was my chance to finally get some real answers, instead of his perfectly rehearsed explanations about golf and his dad's boring friends. So I opened it up and started going through everything. His messages, his photos, his search history, anything that might give me a clue about what he'd actually been doing for those 2 days when he was supposedly just playing terrible golf with a bunch of middle-aged guys. That's when I found it. A text message from someone named Casey that said, "Great weekend. Let's do it again in a few months." My heart literally stopped beating for a second. Casey, he had never, not once, mentioned anyone named Casey, not when he was telling me who was going on the trip, not in any of his updates while he was gone, not in any of his boring stories about golf disasters when he got back. This was it. This was the proof I'd been looking for that he'd been lying to me about everything. Casey was obviously some woman he'd met on the trip. Maybe someone's daughter, maybe a bartender, maybe someone staying at the same hotel. And here she was, already making plans to see him again in a few months. Let's do it again. Do what again? Golf. Or whatever they'd really been doing while I was sitting at home trusting him like an idiot. I screenshotted the message and just sat there staring at it, feeling this rage building up inside me that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. All those times he'd made me feel crazy for asking questions. All those times he'd acted like my concerns were unreasonable. All those times he'd handed over his phone like he had nothing to hide. And here was the evidence that I'd been right all along to be suspicious. He'd been planning this whole thing. The innocent act, the boring golf story, the sweet boyfriend routine when he got home, all of it was just cover for whatever he'd really been doing with Casey. And the worst part was how good he'd been at lying about it. I actually believed him when he said it was just his dad and some old guys. I actually felt bad for being suspicious. By the time Dylan got home from work, I was ready for nuclear war. I had spent hours sitting there, looking at that text message, imagining all the things he and Casey had probably done together, thinking about how stupid I'd been to trust him. The second he walked through the door, with that same innocent smile he always had, I started screaming, "Who the fuck is Casey?" The look on his face was pure confusion, but I wasn't falling for his act anymore. "What are you talking about?" "Brianna." So I shoved the iPad right in his face, showing him the text message that proved everything. "This Casey? The one who wants to do it again. Don't you dare try to lie to me about this." He looked at the screen for maybe 2 seconds before saying, "Casey is my dad's friend, Casey Mitchell. He's like 55 years old and has been playing golf with my dad for 20 years. But I wasn't buying his bullshit anymore. You expect me to believe that you've been lying to me this whole time, and now you're trying to tell me Casey is some old man. I can show you a picture of him if you want," Dylan said, pulling out his own phone. "He's in that group photo I sent you from the first day." But I didn't want to see his fake evidence. I was done being manipulated and gaslit by his innocent act. "Stop lying to me," I screamed. "I know what this is. I know what 'let's do it again' means." That's when something inside me just completely snapped. I was so angry, so tired of being lied to and treated like I was stupid, that I couldn't think straight anymore. I looked around the room and saw his golf bag sitting by the door. Those expensive clubs he was always talking about. The ones he spent more money on than he'd ever spent on me. I grabbed the biggest one and started swinging at everything I could reach. First, the TV, because I was sick of watching him act innocent while he lied right to my face. Then his computer, because God knows what other evidence he had hidden on there. Then his speakers, his lamp, anything that looked expensive or important to him. Dylan was yelling at me to stop, trying to grab the club away from me, but I was too angry to listen. I wanted him to hurt the way I was hurting. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to have something you cared about destroyed by someone you trusted. Stop it. Brianna, just stop, but I couldn't stop. I was too far gone, too angry to think about consequences. And that's when the words came out of my mouth that I can never take back. Well, I cheated on you while you were away because I knew you were going to cheat on me with Casey. Key point 5. The confession. The silence that followed those words was deafening. Dylan stopped trying to grab the golf club. He stopped yelling. He just stood there, staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You what? He whispered. And I could see him trying to process what I'd just said, trying to figure out if he'd heard me correctly. I cheated, I said again, louder this time. Because now that it was out there, I might as well own it, just like you were planning to do with Casey. Casey is a 55-year-old married man with 3 kids. Brianna, he's been my dad's golf buddy since before I was born. But I was done listening to his lies about Casey being some innocent old man. And it wasn't even the first time either, I continued. Because fuck it, if we were doing this, we were going to do it all the way. I've been seeing other people for months, which was absolutely true. There was Trevor from work, who I'd been texting with and meeting up with during my lunch breaks. And there was this guy, Marcus, I'd matched with on a dating app who took me out for drinks whenever Dylan was working late or busy with something else. Honestly, Dylan had become so predictable and boring that I needed something exciting in my life. The same routine every week. Dinner. TV. Sleep. Repeat. The same conversations about his job and his friends and his golf game. The same bland sex that felt more like a chore than anything passionate. I was 26 years old, and I felt like I was already married to someone's grandfather. So when Trevor started flirting with me at work, making jokes and compliments that made me feel attractive and wanted, I didn't shut it down like a good girlfriend would have. And when Marcus messaged me on the app with actual interesting conversation and plans to do things Dylan would never think of, I didn't ignore him or delete the app like I should have. The look of betrayal on Dylan's face should have made me feel guilty. But instead, it felt like vindication, finally. He understood what it felt like to be hurt by someone you trusted. Finally, he knew exactly what kind of person he'd been dating all this time. When, he asked, his voice all quiet and shaky. Where, with who? But I wasn't interested in giving him a detailed timeline of my activities. This wasn't about me being accountable for my choices. This was about him finally facing the truth about what kind of relationship we really had. Does it matter? You were going to do the same thing with Casey anyway. Casey is my dad's friend, he yelled, finally showing some real emotion. His name is Casey Mitchell. He's 55 years old. He's married to a woman named Linda. They have 3 kids and a grandchild on the way. Dylan started pulling up Facebook on his phone, trying to show me Casey's profile with pictures of this middle-aged guy with gray hair and a golf tan. But I didn't want to see his fake evidence. Don't bother, I said. I know what I know. You destroyed my apartment and confessed to cheating because you thought I was having an affair with my dad's 55-year-old golf buddy. The way he said it made it sound ridiculous, but I knew what I'd seen. Get out, he said finally, his voice completely cold and empty. Get out of my apartment right now. So I left, taking my purse and walking right past all the broken glass and destroyed electronics like it was someone else's mess to clean up. I went to stay with my friend Hannah, and honestly, for the first time in months, I felt completely free. No more pretending to be interested in his boring stories. No more having to account for my time or justify my friendships or answer questions about where I'd been or who I'd been with. No more walking on eggshells around his perfect act while he was probably laughing at how gullible I was behind my back. I could finally be honest about what I wanted and who I was without having to manage his feelings about it. The next morning, I started feeling weird about how things had ended. Not guilty. Exactly. But like, maybe I should try to smooth things over so we could have a more civilized conversation about everything. So I texted him, "Hey, I'm sorry about yesterday. I know things got intense. But can we talk? I figured once he'd had time to cool off, we could work this out and maybe even have a better relationship now that all the lies were finally out in the open." But he never responded. Hours went by without even a read receipt. So I tried again. "I miss you. I know everything got crazy, but we've been together too long to just throw it away over one fight." Still nothing. Radio silence, like I didn't even exist anymore. That's when it hit me. He was probably already talking to Casey, telling her all about what a psycho his ex-girlfriend was, making himself look like the victim in the whole situation. So I sent one more text. "I should have known you'd run to Casey the first chance you got. At least now you don't have to sneak around anymore." But he didn't respond to that either. And somehow his silence felt worse than any argument we'd ever had. At least when we were fighting, I knew he still cared enough to engage with me. This complete cutoff felt like I'd been erased from his life entirely. Like our whole relationship had meant nothing to him at all. Key point 6. Karma comes calling. 3 weeks later, I was at Hannah's apartment trying to figure out my next move when someone knocked on the door. Hannah looked through the peephole and said, "There's a police officer out here asking for you." My stomach dropped immediately because I knew exactly what this was about. But I'd been hoping Dylan would just let it go and move on instead of making it into some big legal drama. The officer was holding an envelope with a restraining order and criminal charges for destruction of property. Apparently, Dylan had been documenting everything, taking photos of the broken TV, the destroyed computer, his smashed speakers, the dent in the wall where I'd swung the golf club. Everything I'd broken in my moment of justified anger had been cataloged and priced out by his insurance company. The total damage was over $4,000. $4,000 for a bunch of stuff that could be replaced. While he was sitting there acting like the victim after everything he'd put me through with his lies and manipulation. "You need to appear in court on this date," the officer said, handing me papers that made everything feel suddenly real and serious. But that wasn't even the worst part of what was happening to my life. Somehow, word about our breakup had gotten around to people at work. Hannah, who I thought I could trust with private information, apparently couldn't keep her mouth shut about my confession and had been telling people the whole story, including the part where I'd admitted to cheating and destroying Dylan's apartment over a text from his dad's golf buddy. Suddenly, people I barely knew were giving me looks and whispering when I walked by. My supervisor called me into her office and said she'd been hearing concerning rumors about my personal life and how my behavior might reflect poorly on the store's reputation. She didn't fire me outright, but she made it clear that my position there was becoming untenable given the circumstances. I was basically forced to quit before they could terminate me, which left me unemployed and facing criminal charges at the same time. Meanwhile, Dylan seemed to be thriving without me dragging him down. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard he'd gotten some kind of advancement at his job, was playing in a golf league with his dad, and generally seemed happier and more confident than I'd ever seen him during our relationship. People kept mentioning how good he looked, how much more relaxed he seemed, how he was actually funny and social when he wasn't constantly being questioned and accused of things. Like losing me had been the best thing that could have happened to him. Like our entire relationship had just been holding him back from being his real self. The court case was a nightmare. Dylan showed up with his dad and a lawyer, looking professional and calm while I was there by myself trying to represent my own interests. They had photos of everything I'd broken, receipts for replacement costs, even a recording Dylan had made on his phone during part of our fight where you could hear me screaming and things crashing in the background. When it was my turn to explain my side, I tried to make the judge understand that I'd been provoked, that I'd found evidence Dylan was cheating, that any reasonable person would have reacted emotionally to being betrayed like that. But when Dylan's lawyer showed Casey Mitchell's Facebook profile, complete with family photos, work information, and posts about golf games with Dylan's dad going back years, my explanation started sounding pretty ridiculous. The judge ordered me to pay full restitution plus court costs, which came to almost $6,000 that I definitely didn't have since I was now unemployed. They also issued a permanent restraining order requiring me to stay away from Dylan's apartment, his workplace, and anywhere he might reasonably be expected to go. 4 months after our breakup, I was working at a different retail job for less money, still paying off the debt from the property damage, and living with Hannah because I couldn't afford my own place anymore. Meanwhile, Dylan had apparently moved to a nicer apartment and was dating someone he'd met through his golf league, some woman his age who actually enjoyed the things he enjoyed instead of constantly questioning his motives. I ran into his dad at a shopping center one afternoon and tried to explain my side of things, hoping maybe he could help Dylan understand that I'd just been reacting to what looked like obvious evidence of cheating. But the look he gave me was pure contempt. You destroyed my son's home because you thought he was cheating with me and my 55-year-old married golf buddy. He said loud enough for other shoppers to hear. Casey and I still laugh about it every time we play golf. Then he walked away, leaving me standing there feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. The worst part was realizing that everyone else could see what I couldn't, that I'd thrown away a decent relationship and ruined my own life because I couldn't trust someone who'd never actually given me a real reason not to trust him. But here's what nobody wants to acknowledge. Dylan's act was too perfect. Normal guys have something to hide, some evidence of the kind of person they really are when nobody's watching him. The fact that he seemed so innocent and trustworthy was exactly what made him suspicious in the first place. And if he's doing so well now, if he's so much happier without me, then maybe that just proves he was never as invested in our relationship as he pretended to be. At least now, he can be with someone who won't ask questions or expect honesty about where he's going and who he's with. Someone who will just take his word for everything and never dig deeper to find out what's really going on. Maybe that's exactly the kind of relationship he wanted all along. One where he never has to be accountable for anything because his girlfriend is too naive or trusting to demand the truth.